Emilia by Emanuel Tareem. She stared at the blank page in front of her for a long while and then set the pen down for the third time. She scoured her brain at full speed, searching for original ideas for a story, but try as she might, nothing came to her. As so often before, she wondered what made a good story, what made an event or a series of events interesting and worth telling. If she could answer that question, perhaps the spark of inspiration would strike. Emilia had been trying her hand at writing for several years now, with some interruptions. It all started when she began working on a novel inspired by an idea she had in a dream. The next day, she had spontaneously sat down and hammered away at the keys on her laptop. With the idea in mind, she blindly wrote whatever came to her, and the story unfolded before her astonished eyes as if by magic. But after a while, the inspiration ran dry. She occasionally suffered from depressive moods that drained all creativity and motivation from her, and she paused her writing during those times. When she felt better and remembered the things that brought her joy, she resumed writing. Thus, phases of creative productivity alternated with intellectual slumps of varying lengths over the months and years. Still, she stuck with it and made slow but steady progress on her novel. That is, until the incident happened. Anyway, she had 60,000 words written, 6.5 hours, as she found when she last had the text read aloud through her word processor. She had recently heard from a famous novelist, one of her idols, that beginners in the craft of writing should not start their careers with a novel, but should first practice writing short stories. This statement had thrown her into an unexpected crisis, raising significant doubts about her abilities. Did she really have what it took to be a novelist? Was what she had written so far even good, or did it scream amateur, dilettante? Her idol's words struck a chord with her already low self-esteem, and she took them deeply to heart. Moreover, the circumstances had made it impossible for her to continue working on her novel for the time being. As all this swirled through her mind, a light suddenly went on. She would write a story about a person plagued by self-doubt. She had already drawn on biographical elements in her novel and found that it made writing much easier for her. Perhaps that was part of what made a story worth reading, the author bringing an inner conflict or complex to paper, one that deeply preoccupied them. She picked up the pen, thought briefly, and wrote the first sentence. Her words struck class at a sore spot. She paused. A complete scene unfolded before her mind's eye. Bingo, she thought. I've got a beginning. And she kept writing. He should have known better. It was a mistake to read her the short story, his very first one. Elsa hadn't even tried to hide her displeasure or dress it up in politeness. Okay, he wanted to throw himself back, like a toddler denied a candy. And what exactly did you find, poorly executed, about the story? Her eyes flashed maliciously, her lips curling into a thin smile as she prepared to deal the death blow to his fragile ego. He wanted to punch that grinning face. First of all, your writing style, way too flowery for my taste, too ornate and full of unnecessary adjectives. He swallowed. Go on. Then, the protagonist is far too cliché and too flatly developed, and the story itself lacks that certain something. Too convoluted. I kept thinking, what's the point here? And entirely without the surprising plot twist one expects from a good short story. He was close to tears. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you still have a lot to learn. Emilia set the pen down with satisfaction and began reviewing what she had written so far, already tweaking some phrases and making minor corrections. Writing was fun when inspiration struck and the words flowed effortlessly from her. But just as elated as she felt when that happened, she felt despondent and defeated whenever her mind temporarily went blank. She had to take advantage of the muse's current embrace, and so she gave herself over to it. She kept writing. To be honest, though, Elsa added, I doubt there's much to salvage here. Either you have the talent to write a compelling story, or you don't. And I'm afraid you don't. She smiled her thin smile again. That was the last straw. Class jumped up, sprinted around the office desk where they had been sitting, and lunged at Elsa's throat. She was so stunned she didn't have time to scream for help. Class was already clutching her neck with both hands and all his strength. She let out a gurgling noise and flailed at him, but she had no chance. The hatred that had built up in him over her constant bullying had finally boiled over. She constantly trampled on his pride with disparaging remarks, incessantly criticized him, and never had a word of praise for him. For 4 years, Klaas had worked as Elsa's secretary in a major Berlin publishing house. He handled her email correspondence, assisted in scheduling meetings, managed documents, and took care of numerous other administrative tasks, allowing Elsa to focus on her core business, editing. For some time, Klaas had been writing a novel, which had grown to about 60,000 words, but he had kept this carefully hidden from his boss. Before telling her about his main project, he had wanted to test her reaction by reading her his first short story. Its title was 12,000 Characters Later, and it was about a novelist attempting her first short story, only to botch it completely. Klaas had thought the story was well done and had believed the time was right to reveal his ambitions as a writer by sharing it with Elsa. Well, that had backfired spectacularly, he thought, as he strangled Elsa. Suddenly he realized with horror what he was doing, and he abruptly let go of her throat. Elsa, her eyes wide open, gasped and coughed violently as she backed away toward the office door. She tried to call out, "Hell, help, seek you," but the words wouldn't quite come. In that moment, Klaas realized he hadn't just lost his job, he'd thrown his whole life away with this one act. He stepped toward Elsa and stammered, "I'm sorry, Elsa, I didn't mean to." She continued backing away. "Are you okay?" Then she found her voice again and screamed hysterically, "Help! Help! Security!" Klaas had the fleeting thought that the sound of her scream bore a strong resemblance to primal scream therapy. Then he snapped out of his shock, stumbled past Elsa into the hallway, and ran as fast as he could. Behind him, he heard his boss's shrill screams. Now he was on the run, he thought. He had blown it. Where should he flee? Would he be able to keep writing his novel in prison? Maybe he should flee the country? Emilia set the pen down with a sigh. She looked at the filled page in front of her. No, this isn't working, she thought, her gaze drifting thoughtfully over the bare walls of her prison cell. This is too close to my own story. If only she had let go of her boss's throat back then. But she hadn't stopped until the woman stopped moving, and then some. She would rewrite the story and give it a happy ending. The happy ending her own life was missing. Why not? Here, within these walls, she had all the time in the world, especially now that the guards had granted her the privilege of pen and paper. And she picked up the pen, placed a blank sheet in front of her, and wrote.